The midday sun bathed Buckingham Palace in a golden hue, its light bouncing off the palace gates and onto the worn cobblestones where tourists gathered, murmuring with excitement. Cameras clicked, children giggled, and in the center of the scene, the Queen's guards stood motionless monuments of discipline and decorum. Their red tunics and bearskin hats were not just for show. They were the armor of tradition, of duty, of unshakable silence. Among the crowd that day was a man named Thomas Greer, a war veteran who had lost the use of his legs during service. Confined to a wheelchair, Thomas wasn't just another tourist, he was someone who had lived the weight of sacrifice. His hands were calloused from years of pushing himself forward, and his eyes, clouded with age and memories, carried a weight that couldn't be measured. As the clock struck 12 p.m., the familiar sound of boots hitting stone echoed across the palace front. It was time for the changing of the guard. The crowd instinctively shifted, giving space, raising their phones, watching with reverence and anticipation. From the barracks emerged the new set of guards, marching in precise unison. Tourists leaned on fences, whispering in awe, but Thomas wanted more than just a glimpse. Wheeling himself forward with surprising speed, he moved past the line of spectators and right into the open path directly in front of the oncoming guard. The crowd gasped. A woman near the front let out a startled "Oh my God" as phones shifted to record. The guards kept marching, their formation unbroken. And then it happened. One of the guards, young, stoic, eyes fixed ahead, stepped just feet from Thomas's wheelchair. According to protocol, he should have issued a warning, demanded clearance, and continued forward. But instead, the guard stopped. Dead in his tracks, the silence that followed was deafening. The other guards marched around them, continuing the formation without hesitation, but this one guard remained locked in place, facing the man in the wheelchair. For a moment, no one breathed. Cameras were forgotten. The two men simply stared at each other, one embodying tradition, the other resilience. Then, in a gesture no one expected, the guard broke protocol. He took a step forward and leaned down, just slightly, just enough for his voice to reach Thomas without the crowd hearing. He said something, quiet but unmistakably kind. Thomas's eyes widened. A single tear rolled down his cheek. Then he nodded. The guard stepped aside and held his arm out, not aggressively, but as a subtle guide inviting Thomas to move safely off the path. Thomas, trembling slightly, wheeled himself to the side. The guard gave a single nod, returned to his formation, and marched on as if nothing had happened. But to the crowd, everything had changed. As the ceremony concluded, tourists surrounded Thomas. Some applauded, others cried. A few guards later returned and quietly thanked him for his service. One young boy asked for a photo with him. That day, Buckingham Palace didn't just witness tradition, it witnessed humanity. And in the silence between the marching boots, in the moment a Queen's Guard chose compassion over coldness, the world was reminded that true honor isn't in following rules blindly, but in recognizing when breaking them is the bravest act of all. As the crowd slowly dispersed, something lingered in the air, an energy, a weight, a story that had settled into the stones beneath their feet. People weren't just leaving with pictures, they were leaving with something deeper. A lesson, a moment etched into their memory. Thomas remained near the front gates, gazing at the palace with tearful eyes. One of the palace staff approached quietly and handed him a small card and invitation. The Queen's Guard who had stopped was requesting to meet him privately inside the palace grounds. Thomas's hands trembled as he held the card. He hadn't stepped beyond those gates since the war. And now, he was being invited not as a tourist, but as an honored guest. Minutes later, escorted past the curious eyes of the public, Thomas found himself in a small courtyard behind the main gate. Waiting for him was the same guard, now helmet removed, revealing a young man no older than 30. His name tag read Corporal James Whitmore. Whitmore saluted. "Sir, thank you for your service." Thomas tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. "I wasn't trying to be disrespectful," Thomas finally said. I needed to feel like I belonged somewhere again." Whitmore nodded, his eyes soft, and you do, more than most of us. They talked for several minutes about duty, about pain, about silence. It was a conversation not many would understand. Two soldiers from different generations, both shaped by the weight of responsibility. The palace walls, usually so silent and rigid, seemed to soften around them. As they parted ways, Whitmore handed Thomas Apache's own regiment insignia. "You're one of us," he said, "always were." Thomas left that day not just with photos or souvenirs, but with something infinitely more valuable: dignity restored. For the first time in years, he felt seen not as a man in a wheelchair, not as a tourist, but as a veteran. As a brother &arms. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the towers of Buckingham Palace, a post appeared online. A photo of the Queen's Guard paused mid-march, standing before a man in a wheelchair. It went viral within hours, but it wasn't just the image people shared, it was the feeling it gave them. A reminder that tradition without heart is hollow, and that the true strength of a soldier isn't in how still he stands but in how deeply he feels.